Many citizens and journalists have many questions about the constantly changing appearance of our President Putin. If you come up with the idea of comparing Putin's appearance and voice at the beginning of his rule and now, you will be amazed at the obvious difference.
Dear friends,
Today on New Year's Eve,
we are together on the threshold of a new,
just like you, with family and friends.
of 2014.
I was going to listen to the words of greeting from the President of Russia.
Французского сопротивления. Никогда не забудем тех, кто... Но огромное количество наших граждан. Президент Оланд был настолько любезен, что пригласил меня как представителя России на эти торжественные мероприятия, что это всегда помогает при принятии каких-то прагматических, я бы сказал, даже технократических решений в сфере экономики. Трагические, печальные и в то же время торжественные. Я с удовольствием принимаю это приглашение и благодарен президенту.
Moreover, if you carefully examine the photos and videos of the President for the entire period of his political activity, you can count not one, but up to 6 doubles. Please notice how Putin's forehead wrinkles are different in photographs from different years. One person's forehead wrinkle pattern does not change with time. And here we see a straight tick, then waves. Such differences cannot be explained by age-related changes, even if we assume that the original had plastic surgery to maintain a youthful appearance. Wrinkles around the eyes have different shapes, either a deep triangle to the middle of the cheek or an almost flat arc. Diagonal wrinkles and dashes are also visible or absent. Different mannerisms in the same hand gesture. Different earlobes. A letter from one of Putin's colleagues appeared on the internet. He writes that, at the beginning of his presidency, he recognized friends. They even went skiing in Austria during one of his visits. Since 2006, Putin has stopped recognizing him. A colleague suggested that the reason could be Putin's death from spinal cancer and his subsequent replacement with a double. In 2005, Russian doctors discovered Putin had spinal cancer, and he was sent to Germany for examination and treatment. German doctors confirmed the diagnosis. According to one of them, Putin had several months to live. The treatment was refused. Putin was taken to Russia. How surprised this doctor was when, about 6 months later, he saw him on TV, cheerful and healthy. The colleague also notes that Putin's double speaks German like a person who has learned it well. Vladimir, on the other hand, spoke German with an East German accent. Putin, a professional intelligence officer, has lived in Germany for 5 years. According to published biographical information, at the beginning of his presidential term, he speaks excellent German and uses complex constructions.
Und manchmal aufrichtig, ganz ehrlich gesagt von eigener Ungewandtheit, schlägt unter dem allen das starke, lebendige Herz Russlands.
2007, Putin makes serious mistakes in speech. Mistakes are cut out on German channels, not on Russian ones.
Sie haben gemacht, geben Sie mir Zeit, das zu beantworten. Sie haben gemacht, was Sie gemacht wollten. Jetzt lassen Sie uns in Ruhe, geben Sie mir Zeit, das zu beantworten.
The year is 2012. Putin speaks with sentences from a 5th grade secondary school program, and the pronunciation leaves much to be desired. April 2013, Putin cannot do without an interpreter.
Ask Madam Federal Chancellor to support Yekaterinburg as the
Lebendige Herz Russlands.
2013, an interview with a German television company. The presenter's speech is clearly being translated to him. Please note that Putin responds only after he hears the translation.
Warum handeln Ihre Behörden so?
Вы пугаете немецкую общественность.
Ich glaube, Sie schüchtern die deutsche Öffentlichkeit ein.
Ничего подобного не происходит.
Es passiert doch gar nichts Ähnliches und man muss die Menschen nicht einschüchtern, man muss objektiv die Entwicklungen beleuchten. Und was ist denn die objektive Beleuchtung? Ende vergangen.
As soon as the presenter starts talking, Putin puts on his headphones again.
Nach unserem Verständnis funktioniert
In February 2014, the media showed a story about a meeting between Putin and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. The Prime Minister tries to pet Putin's dog, and the Russian president warned that it was biting. Dog handlers, endocrinologists, noticed the strange behavior of the dog. According to them, dogs don't behave like that in the presence of their owner. The conclusion is either the wrong dog or the wrong Putin, who selects and trains the doubles. Obviously, this is the hand style of the secret intelligence services. The logical conclusion is that political decisions in our country are being made by the same Western masters of the Yeltsin coup and, most likely, the current Russian authorities. Now the authorities are engaged in identifying the identity of every citizen, but it is important for every citizen to think about identifying the identity of the president. This issue has always been important both in history and in politics. For example, at the birth of the heir to the English throne, the Minister of the Interior was always present so that the heir would not be replaced. It is only in recent years that everything has been done to prevent the identification of the rulers. This is how Kate Middleton, the wife of British Prince William, gave birth for the first time in history without the presence of the minister. In Russia, the Volya Party was the only one who turned the issue of Putin's doubles from the category of gossip into an official inquiry. The response from the Prosecutor General's office was shocking. Changing the president's appearance does not violate your civil rights. We don't know anything about Putin's family, also allegedly for security reasons, but in no other country in the world do presidents hide their children or their wives. On the contrary, they are always in plain sight, and it is important for voters what kind of family man their president is. But if Putin has been replaced, then it becomes clear why we don't see his family. Apparently, the children and the wife, who has already become annex, simply do not want to live with a stranger, a double of their father and husband. In addition, they may unwittingly reveal this secret, and it is better to keep them away.
Well, who's against them? Some kind of an asshole, Solovey. Or Anatoly Shary, a seemingly completely independent blogger, did not lag behind. Idiotic lies about Putin's death can be made by the Russian special services in order to demonstrate the stupidity of the press, sucking up these idiotic lies for the 100th time. Anatoly did not understand that if we talk about the stupidity of the press, then in this case Shary himself topped the list of this stupid press. But why all this information noise about such an insignificant internet fool? And you see, 2 days before the Solovey, on October 24th, allegedly out of the blue Peskov crowed about Putin's doubles. Rumors that Putin had heart problems over the weekend are groundless. He's fine. This is another rumor. The claim that the president has doubles belongs to the category of absurd canards. He doesn't have any doubles. It doesn't cause anything but a smile. End of quote. As you can see, at first the Kremlin began to refute some rumors about doubles, and only then, 2 days later, Solovey came out so that everyone would think that he had spread these rumors. But if it wasn't Solovey, then who actually started the conversation about Putin's doubles? In fact, on October 20th, the Japanese TV company TBS News compared 3 modern Putins using artificial intelligence and came to the conclusion that Putin has 2 doubles. The photo of the real Putin was not compared with modern artists by the Japanese so as not to compromise the Japanese authorities. And photos were taken of only 3 of just those artists in the role of Putin. With that, the Japanese mistook the one who hosted the parade on the podium on May 9th for the real Putin, as if any artist couldn't stand on the podium and read a speech. I repeat, the Japanese did not dare to compare the photos of these 3 artists with the photos of the real Putin. Here is a short excerpt from this broadcast.
First, let's compare Putin's voice when he visited a helicopter factory in eastern Siberia in March this year. What is the difference between these 2 fragments? Voice specialist Mitsutoshi Muraoka. Here you can see that the first letter S is strongly highlighted. The PA sound reaches a value of 9 kHz, and the C sound reaches a value of 5.4 kHz.
死というのがここに来てるんですね。これが 4.5kHz になります。
Let's compare it with this.
これに対し
Here, the letter S in the word spasibo sounds very weak.
非常に弱いということがわかります。
In addition to the difference in pronunciation of the S sound, there is also a difference in pronunciation of the sounds of pi and C. Let's hear it again.
大きな隔たりがあると言います。これを踏まえた上でもう一度聞いてみます。
It is necessary to take into account the difference in recording conditions as well as in pronunciation as such, but still, such differences are extremely rare. At the moment, we can say that the probability that these voices belong to different people is very high. We consider the real Putin to be the one depicted in the top photo taken on May 9th at the Victory Day parade. We compare the other 2 images using artificial intelligence. The similarity to the person who visited the Crimean Bridge is 53%, which is a low indicator. In most cases, facial recognition experts would say that there is no match. Because of this, it is assumed that it may be a double. The other photo has 40% similarity, which is even lower, which means it's probably another double. Moreover, the similarity between the 2 photos is 18%, which indicates that they are 2 different people. Expert analyses of artificial intelligence on face recognition clearly show a high probability of having at least 2 doubles. The gait of Putin, who appeared at the naval parade, had 86% coincidence. This, of course, looks enough, but for artificial intelligence, these numbers indicate the presence of another person. Here are the results of an analysis of Putin's visit to Mariupol. The percentage of matches dropped to 75%, which adds to the likelihood of a double. The conclusion was made based on the study of body position during walking.
All over the world, computer programs identify citizens by their faces, even when making monetary transactions. That is, they would not even have been given Putin's pension in the faces of these 3 artists. And our domestic morons of the opposition are screaming in unison, Putin, Putin. There are no censored words. Meaning this Solovey, posing as a moron, covered up all the talkers, including the opposition, from having to discuss the conclusions of Japanese artificial intelligence. Solovey, let's say, threw himself at the embrasure with his chest of the information so necessary for the people of Russia and Ukraine. That's why he's needed. This.
Then I found an article by Die Welt, which was thoroughly wiped up on the internet. Lyudmila Putina does not recognize her husband. She says, "I don't recognize Putin. Where did Putin go?"
Hello. My name is Dmitri Alexeyevich, and today is June 15th, 2025. And today we continue the conversation regarding our previous appeal to people of honor, which we made last week, and which concerned how to do what U.S. President Donald Trump has been unable to do for 3 months now. Namely, stop the massacre in Ukraine in just 1 day. And this is simply connected with the exposure of the double of the president of the Russian Federation, Putin, which, if these people of honor wish to do, they could stop the massacre in Ukraine practically in 1 day. But unfortunately, so far we do not see anyone wanting to stop the massacre in Ukraine, but we are seeing the exact opposite, that despite our 3 consecutive appeals, the slaughter in Ukraine continues, and instead of exposing Putin's doubles, the powers that be, as well as all the lackeys who serve them in the information space, rushed on the opposite to create the so-called anti-crisis, try in every way to prove that the president of the Russian Federation allegedly exists. He is just very bad, evil, and aggressive. This is the topic we will continue today with our regular interlocutor, a guest from Odessa, Mikhail Sergeyevich. Hello.
Hello, Dmitri Alexeyevich. I will start with the famous classic Mikhail Yuryevich Lermontov. But there's God's judgment, which fears not to wait. A dreadful judgment that's not bought nor sold. It knows your inmost thoughts, ye panders reprobate. It does not even hear the clink of gold. Dmitri Alexeyevich, I considered it correct that, in principle, worldly rulers do not even try to live according to God's commandments, although they create the appearance of it. As I see it, they show that they serve the Heavenly Father, as it is written in the Holy Scriptures. But then again, we have judges who consider themselves to be representatives and viceroys of the Supreme Judge, and I, Mikhail Sergeyevich, am a servant of God, and above me there is only the Supreme Judge. And I believe that there are people, true people of the Spirit and representatives of the clergy, true aristocrats who live according to the true concepts of good and evil and serve the Supreme Judge and are not under the power of the father of lies. And I want to appeal to such people, because I believe that perhaps last time my appeal might not have reached them, but now I hope that it will. I will try to make sure that this appeal reaches them. And this time, I will personally list all such people so that they react, because if they do not react by, I said for myself, by June 22nd, because on June 22nd, perhaps we can see another world massacre, where not a million, but millions of inhabitants of the earth will die, due to the fact that the lie was not dispelled, and from a small lie comes a big lie, and from it comes God's punishment, because God does not like it when people serve the devil and the father of lies, so this time I will address them by name. Here is who I want to address at the moment. Let's start with Catholicism. We have a vicar of the Holy See, the Pope, and he was elected by the cardinals, after all, and I want to address those cardinals who elected the Vicar of Christ, the Pope, who serve the Viceroy of God on the Holy See. I want to address them and the Vicar of Christ himself. I also want to address not only the Catholic Church, but all other churches, and here I list them by name, those to whom I address this important statement. Catholic Church, Latin Church, Greek Catholic Church, Italo-Albanian Catholic Church, Melkite Catholic Church, Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, Ruthenian Greek Catholic Church, Romanian Greek Catholic Church, Bulgarian Greek Catholic Church, Slovak Greek Catholic Church, Hungarian Greek Catholic Church, Belarusian Greek Catholic Church, Albanian Greek Catholic Church, Russian Greek Catholic Church, Croatian Greek Catholic Church, Macedonian Greek Catholic Church, Armenian Catholic Church. Here I am addressing all Catholics, both the cardinals and the Pope, declaring that since 2006, a certain Satanist, liar, deceiver and impostor, using his external resemblance to Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, or a silicone mask that provides such resemblance, has been posing as the President of the Russian Federation Putin V. This is the same liar, deceiver and impostor who staged a massacre in Ukraine, in which millions of citizens of Ukraine and Russia are dying, and all the countries of Europe and, in principle, the whole world can be drawn into this massacre. I believe that any communication, interaction with the President of the Russian Federation in this situation automatically means your recognition of this impostor and liar in the role of the President of the Russian Federation Putin, and this entails that representatives of the Church automatically lose God's grace and lose their right to be called representatives of the Church and spiritual mentors. Therefore, I, Mikhail Sergeyevich, a free man, a resident of Ukraine, I appeal to Catholics with a request to publicize the fact of the substitution of the President of the Russian Federation by criminals for a liar, a deceiver and an impostor, moreover, one who is implementing a policy of Satanism, which is clearly evident from the massacre in Ukraine, which was unleashed in the name of this impostor. This is very serious. Therefore, please convey this message of mine to your church hierarchs and ask them to express their position regarding the recognition of a liar and impostor, pretending to be Putin V. and illegally occupying the seat of the President of the Russian Federation. A huge request to help in disseminating my appeal. Then I want to address Orthodoxy and its representatives. Here is a list of the churches I address. Russian Orthodox Church, Belarusian Orthodox Church, Ukrainian Orthodox Church, Constantinople Orthodox Church, Russian Orthodox Church abroad, Finnish Orthodox Church, Estonian Apostolic Orthodox Church, Cretan Orthodox Church, Ukrainian Orthodox Church in Canada, Ukrainian Orthodox Church in the USA, Alexandrian Orthodox Church, Antiochian Orthodox Church, Jerusalem Orthodox Church, Sinai Orthodox Church, Chinese Orthodox Church, Latvian Orthodox Church, Moldovan Orthodox Church, Estonian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate, Japanese Orthodox Church, Georgian Orthodox Church, Serbian Orthodox Church, Romanian Orthodox Church, Bulgarian Orthodox Church, Cypriot Orthodox Church, Greek Orthodox Church, Albanian Orthodox Church, Polish Orthodox Church, Orthodox Church of the Czech lands and Slovakia, Orthodox Church in America, Orthodox Church of Ukraine, Macedonian Orthodox Church, Apostolic Orthodox Church, True Orthodox Church, Raphael, Catholic Orthodox Church of France, Orthodox Church of Our Lady of Sovereignty, Russian Catacomb Church of True Orthodox Christians, Ukrainian Autocephalous Orthodox Church Canonical, Ukrainian Reformed Orthodox Church, Church of St. John the Evangelist, Toronto. Before all branches of the Orthodox Church, I appeal to the Ecumenical Patriarch, as well as to the Patriarch of all Rus, Kirill, as well as to all other hierarchs, as well as to the parishioners of the Russian Orthodox Church. My appeal. Please take note that the post of the President of the Russian Federation Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin is occupied by a liar, a deceiver and an impostor, who is not Putin V. In reality, but is simply a so-called double who looks like Putin V, or an actor in a silicone mask that provides an external resemblance to Putin V, or, to use more traditional Russian language, this is an actor under the silicone guise of Putin V. Remember that any interaction with this lying person who unleashed the massacre in Ukraine calls for thousands of victims every day. And most importantly, due to the fact that this massacre in Ukraine is not a declared war, those who participate in this undeclared war violate God's commandment "Thou shalt not kill," for which they will inevitably go to hell. Please pay attention to my appeal. This is very important, because silence about sin is sin, and assistance to a lie is a lie. Therefore, the Church, especially the Russian Church, cannot condone the fact that the place of the head of the Russian state is occupied by a liar and an impostor. If you remain silent, then you will have to answer for this lie at the last judgment of God. This is what I am addressing to the representatives of the Orthodox Church. Then I want to address all representatives of Protestant denominations. I will not list all their multiple names, but will address them all at once. Dear Protestant Christians, if you are truly God-fearing people, you cannot tolerate the lie that the Russian Federation is allegedly governed by the real President Vladimir Putin, because this is a lie, and this lie is obvious. The one who pretends to be Putin Vladimir Vladimirovich is not such. The person pretending to be the president of the Russian Federation Putin V is a double who does not particularly resemble the real Putin, or even an actor in a silicone mask, which is not just a crime from the point of view of the laws of the Russian Federation, but also a lie and deception from the point of view of the law of God, which all Christians are obliged to follow. Therefore, please remember that it is not proper for a Christian to condone a lie, not to mention participate in this lie. Remember, when you yourself accuse or your leaders accuse Russian President Putin of any crimes, for example, aggression against Ukraine, you do nothing more than cover up a lie, because instead of accusing the impostor in the role of Russian President Putin of being a liar and an impostor, who is not Putin V, in reality, you subscribe to the lie that Russian President Putin is supposedly real. That is, anyone who accuses Putin of allegedly being an evil aggressor or a totalitarian violator of human rights, instead of accusing him of being a double, an actor in a silicone mask, and therefore a liar and an impostor, illegally occupying the chair of the President of the Russian Federation, essentially commits a crime called lying. He lies, violating the commandment "You shall not lie." Therefore, I also appeal to you, dear Protestant Christians, ordinary parishioners and their spiritual mentors, please, stop recognizing the President of the Russian Federation as some evil Putin and start recognizing him as a double or an actor in a silicone mask, that is, a liar, an impostor and a criminal illegally occupying the chair of the President of the Russian Federation, and announce this to everyone. So with this statement I appeal to everyone, to all representatives of the Orthodox faith, and Catholic, and Protestant. Now I also want to appeal to representatives of the main world religions. I also want to appeal to the clergy of Islam, as well as to the leaders of Muslim countries. I appeal to both Sunnis and Shiites, to imams, muftis, ayatollahs, and to ordinary Muslims. I also want to address the representatives of Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Iraq, Syria, to all people of honor who live according to the commandments of the Almighty, because they have submitted to the will of Allah. Please remember that the chair of the President of the Russian Federation is not occupied by the real President Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, but by his double or an actor in a silicone mask, that is, a criminal who does not have the legal right to occupy the chair of the President of the Russian Federation. And therefore, when you officially interact with a liar and impostor in the role of President of the Russian Federation Putin, you are actually dealing with the devil himself. And when you enter into an agreement with someone who pretends to be Putin, you are actually concluding an agreement with the devil himself, which will undoubtedly cause the great wrath of God and entail God's punishment. Please remember that by officially perceiving a Putin double or an actor in a silicone Putin mask as the allegedly real President of the Russian Federation Putin V, you are not only deceiving your peoples who trust you as spiritual mentors and leaders, but first of all you are deceiving yourselves. However, you cannot deceive the Almighty, since the Almighty perfectly sees hypocrites, liars and deceivers and their sinful deeds. Also, separately, I want to address the Jews and their rabbis. I want to address the people of Israel and the Prime Minister of Israel Benjamin Netanyahu. Please know that when you deal with the leadership of the Russian Federation, you are not dealing with the real president of the Russian Federation, not the citizen of the Russian Federation Putin v, but with a double, or an actor in a silicone mask. That is, some kind of Satanist, liar, imposter and criminal who pretends to be Putin v, and therefore illegally occupies the chair of the President of the Russian Federation. Please remember that any interaction with such a liar and imposter in the role of the President of the Russian Federation Putin is a grave sin, and, moreover, it is also humiliation. By communicating with an imposter in the role of Putin, you humiliate not only yourself personally, but also the state that you lead and which you represent in negotiations. Also, please remember that all agreements concluded with an imposter in the role of Putin will in any case be invalid when this deception is revealed, and undoubtedly, this causes humiliation of the Israeli people, an insult to the feelings of believers and an insult to the national pride of your state. In this regard, I would like to separately address Beryl Lazar, who was a member of the Federation of Jewish Communities of the Russian Federation, and all the rabbis of Ukraine, Russia, Belarus, and Israel, and I would also like to address the Chechen people, the representative of the Muslim community Ramzan Akhmatovich Kadyrov and his speaker Abtai Aronovich Alaudanov. You position yourselves as people of honor, but at the same time you are not dealing with the real Putin Vladimir Vladimirovich, whom the people elected president of the Russian Federation, but with another person, the false Putin, the one who is not a sovereign, but a liar and an impostor, who, moreover, is waging an undeclared war in Ukraine, and thereby violating God's commandment thou shalt not kill, and at the same time drawing other citizens of the Russian Federation into violating the commandment thou shalt not kill, forcing them to kill in a war that has not been declared. Please realize this sad fact and take it very seriously, especially remembering that for the Lord God there are no states, because for the Lord God there is only the law of God and the true concepts of good and evil. And therefore, for complicity in such a sin, that is, for silence about it, and in fact, for connivance in the occupation of the chair of the President of the Russian Federation by an impostor and a liar, you will certainly bear responsibility at the Last Judgment. But if you are not afraid of the Last Judgment, are not afraid of going to eternal life in hell, then you, of course, can continue to grimace, pretending that Putin's double is supposedly the real Putin, and you are supposedly the soldiers or foot soldiers of this very real Putin. Or, on the contrary, you can continue to grimace, pretending that Putin's double is supposedly the real Putin, an evil aggressor and evil violator of human rights who is supposedly awaiting trial in The Hague. Just remember that trial in The Hague will never see Putin's double. But the Last Judgment will definitely see you personally. And it will hold you accountable for your complicity in this truly grandiose satanic deception. This is my appeal this time. This time I decided to address each of you in turn. And I really hope that my appeal will achieve its goal. And now I want to comment on the reaction to our previous appeal regarding Putin's doubles. Well, as I understand it, Dmitri Alexeyevich, you will publish our appeal in English in text and video format?
Yes, of course, I will publish it. But I have one suggestion. I suggest that we finish our recording at this very moment, and then start another recording to discuss it in a separate video format.
Yes, sure, I agree.
Because then it would be good if we continued to discuss the reaction to our appeal in a separate video. And I ask everyone to consider this video of our joint appeal, which I also join, and I ask everyone to save this video. Repost it wherever possible and share it with friends, acquaintances, and even strangers, and also translate it into English and other foreign languages, and try to get it to as many people as possible. And I sincerely hope that this will finally help to do what Donald Trump has been unable to do for the third month now, and finally stop this senseless massacre in Ukraine, in which, on both sides, probably about 2 million Russian people have already been killed. Well, together, Russians and Ukrainians on both sides. And I hope that you will not refuse us this appeal. Thank you all. Goodbye and all the best. And first of all, I wish everyone a peaceful sky above their heads and a speedy end to the massacre in Ukraine.
Hello, my name is Dmitri Alexeyevich, and today is January 17th, 2026 AD. It's 8 a.m. Kiev time, and we're beginning our unusual recording with my fellow Odessa resident, Mikhail Sergeyevich, who expressed a desire to address the head of the Kingdom of Denmark and other heads of state, to the crowned heads, and offer his proposal on how they can protect the Danish monarch's rightful possession of Greenland from the illegal attempt to annex it by the United States under the leadership of President Trump. Mikhail Sergeyevich, I give you the floor.
Hello, today is the 17th day of January, 2026 AD. 8 a.m. Kiev time. My name is Mikhail Sergeyevich. I am a resident of Ukraine, a free man, a servant of God. I live in the city of Odessa between Marsalskaya Street and Mercury Center. I decided to take this opportunity to record my address to free men, servants of God, crowned heads, monarchs, and heads of European states' powers regarding the situation in Greenland. I hope Dmitri Alexeyevich will publish my appeal on his resources and perhaps comment on it. I would like to begin an appeal to the sovereign crowned heads and the supreme pontiff of the Universal Church. I am writing to assist you in protecting the territorial integrity of the states of the European Union and the Danish royal family in particular. As you all know, the island of Greenland, the legal property of the Danish kingdom, is currently under threat of illegal annexation by the United States of America, which had the audacity to infringe on the sovereignty of the Danish kingdom. This violates all international norms and norms of customary law, as well as international treaties on the inseparability of the borders. The actions of the United States of America, in this regard, can be qualified as primitive so-called bullying. That is, the intimidation of a weaker animal by a stronger animal, without taking into account the fact that in this case we are not talking about animals, or even about individual Homo sapiens but about sovereign states headed by sovereign heads of states. The attempt to intimidate, albeit a small but still sovereign kingdom of Denmark by the United States solely from a position of strength without regard for international treaties, the legal norms of the United Nations, and the norms of customary law, is a profound humiliation of both the sovereign kingdom of Denmark and its sovereign head personally, such as its sovereign partners in the European Union and in the North Atlantic Alliance. It seems to me that the very possibility is so humiliating for the kingdom. This demand of the U.S. president transferring Greenland to U.S. sovereignty or forcing its alleged sale stems solely from the recently emerged practice of condoning an attack by one sovereign power on another sovereign power, without a formal declaration of war, and condoning large-scale military operations on the sovereign territory of another state, without the warring parties being formally in a state of war. Of course, I mean the full-scale armed invasion by Russian Federation troops of the sovereign territory of Ukraine, recognized as sovereign by the Russian Federation, without a declaration of war in February 2022, and the prolonged conduct by the Russian Federation of military operations on the sovereign territory of Ukraine. without being formally in a state of war. This was accomplished with the astonishing connivance of both member states of the European Union and the entire international community as a whole. Strangely enough, no state in the world has decided to accuse the Russian Federation of flagrantly violating the Third Hague Convention and attacking a sovereign state. Primarily without declaring war, as strange as it may sound, despite the fact that the Russian Federation has occupied significant territories of the sovereign Ukrainian state and is even attempting to formally annex them, declaring them sovereign possession of the Russian Federation. The Ukrainian state and the Russian Federation are still not in a state of war with each other. Therefore, they are at peace with each other. Moreover, despite the formal state of peace between the sovereign Russian Federation and the sovereign Ukrainian state, the United States of America is pressuring the President of Ukraine to sign a so-called peace agreement with the Russian Federation and to cede to the Russian Federation the illegally seized sovereign Ukrainian territories. European powers, however, are well aware that the Russian Federation has seized and is occupying sovereign Ukrainian territories illegally while formally staying with Ukraine not in a state of war but in a state of peace. Nevertheless, they do not dare to declare this openly. Just as before in February 2022 they were ready to accuse the Russian Federation of so-called aggression, but were unable to accuse it of the most important thing: violating the Third Hague Convention and attacking sovereign Ukraine without declaring war. Thus, the European powers not only condone the Russian Federation which is waging military action against Ukraine without declaring war, and thus, with illegally occupying sovereign Ukrainian territories, the European powers are also condoning the completely illegal pressure by the United States on the President of Ukraine with the aim of forcing sovereign Ukraine to cede to the Russian Federation the illegally occupied territories, which it seized without declaring war and which it is trying to nominate contrary to all norms of customary law. Such a cowardice, and I would even put it more bluntly, such lackeyish connivance on the part of the European powers there is, that together with the violation of the Third Hague Convention by the Russian Federation, there is the illegal pressure by the United States on the President of Ukraine to coerce Ukraine into signing a so-called peace treaty, in conditions under which Ukraine and the Russian Federation are already formally at peace, and not at all at war. Ultimately, it plays a cruel joke against the European powers themselves because it created a dangerous international precedent, namely, the ability to seize by force and annex other countries' sovereign territories without declaring war, contrary to all norms of customary law, but simply by the right of the strong. It is precisely thanks to your, dear sirs, lackeyish connivance mentioned above lead to today the United States of America feels entitled to seize by force and annex the sovereign possession of the Kingdom of Denmark, the island of Greenland. A precedent was set. You yourselves agreed that the Russian Federation allegedly has the right to occupy the lands of sovereign Ukraine without declaring war. The United States allegedly has the right now to demand that sovereign Ukraine cede its sovereign territories illegally occupied by Russian troops, allegedly under a peace treaty, despite the absence of a state of war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. Now Europe faced of the same thing as it created with its connivance in the violation of the Third Hague Convention by the Russian Federation. Namely, today the United States of America also believes that it allegedly has the right to annex the island of Greenland, which belongs to the Kingdom of Denmark, without declaring war on the Kingdom of Denmark. A precedent was set, and you yourselves, respected gentlemen, created it back in February 2022, when you, instead of accusing the Russian Federation as of attacking sovereign Ukraine without declaring war, you preferred to accuse the Russian Federation of so-called aggression. Nevertheless, I do not think that the still formally sovereign states of Europe, especially those headed by sovereign crowned monarchs and in particular the sovereign Kingdom of Denmark, are ready to accept such humiliation as the United States of America is about to inflict on them by forcing the Kingdom of Denmark to sell Greenland, or even going further and bribing the population of Greenland to sway them to illegal separatism with the goal of subsequently annexing Greenland. In this regard, I would like to propose a very simple solution that is obvious. Yes, the United States of America are very strong. Yes, they possess superior military power. Yes, they have arrogated to themselves the right to print paper dollars since the early 1980s, not backed by gold even formally, but nevertheless for some reason serving as a mean of international settlement instead of the sovereign's gold as is right. And therefore they can buy anything and anyone by simply printing the necessary amount of green paper. Yes, Europe is currently seriously weakened, including the fact that the United States and Great Britain through joint well thought out actions nations have pitted all of Europe against the Russian Federation on one hand, and by depriving European countries of cheap Russian energy resources. On the other hand, by forcing Europe to pay for the senseless massacre in Ukraine, which isn't even a declared war. But nevertheless, the United States has one weak spot. Namely the crime of September 11, 2001, also known as 9/11. As all of you being high-ranking government leaders are well aware of the 3 buildings of the World Trade Center in New York, that is the Twin Towers and Building 7, were not destroyed by burning kerosene and by 2 aluminum planes of so-called Arab terrorists that crashed completely into the remaining buildings. But with the underground thermonuclear explosions of high power which earned the official name of Ground Zero, that is the epicenter of a nuclear explosion to the World Trade Center demolition site. So why don't you simply threaten the United States and their leadership that if the United States continues to pressure the sovereign kingdom of Denmark with the aim of forcing it to humiliatingly sell the island of Greenland, or if the United States dare to seize the island of Greenland by force? As a retaliatory measure, the injured party will publicly expose all the undisclosed aspects of the crime of September 11, and in particular how the U.S. government as a cowardly villain fully aware of what it was doing sent to work at the place called Ground Zero several tens of thousands of naive American volunteers without adequate personal protective equipment, as a result of which tens of thousands of these same volunteers who inhaled radioactive vapor later died in terrible agony from leukemia and other various forms of cancer. I am sincerely convinced that such a tough approach by European leaders is capable of once and for all cool down the aggressive fervor of the leadership of the United States of America. It will force the United States to return to respecting the sovereignty of European states which in a fit of chauvinistic frenzy they were ready to subject to such humiliation as the seizure and appropriation of Greenland. This is the essence of my appeal. I address it to the following royals and other heads of state and to His Majesty King Frederick X of Denmark, to His Holiness the Vicar of Christ Pope Leo XIV, to His Majesty the King of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland Charles III, to His Majesty King Philip of Belgium, to His Majesty King Carl XVI of Sweden, to His Majesty King Philip VI of Spain, to His Serene Highness Prince Albert II of Monaco, to His Majesty King William Alexander of the Netherlands, as well as to the following heads of state and government. To the President of France Mr. Emmanuel Macron, to the President of Finland Mr. Alexander Stull, to the President of the Swiss Confederation Mr. Guy Parmelin, to the Prime Minister of Italy Mrs. Giorgio Meloni, to the Federal Chancellor of Germany Mr. Friedrich Merz, to the Federal Chancellor of Austria Mr. Christian Stocker, to the Prime Minister of Denmark Mrs. Mette Frederiksen, to the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom Great Britain and Northern Ireland Mr. Keir Starmer, to the Prime Minister of Belgium Mr. Bart de Wever, to the Prime Minister of Sweden Mr. Ulf Kristersson, to the Prime Minister of Spain Mr. Pedro Sanchez Perez Castellano, to the Prime Minister of the Netherlands Mr. Dick Schaaf. I sincerely hope that my address to all the aforementioned gentlemen reaching their ears will help them make the right decision worthy of the greatness of the peoples and states they lead. Thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you, Mikhail Sergeyevich, for your speech. I listened very carefully. I think everything you said was spot on. I actually have nothing to add. In fact, it would be unethical to do so, because this is, after all, your speech, not mine. I'm simply offering you the opportunity to speak on my channel. Well, I think everyone understood everything. And I hope that Mikhail Sergeyevich's speech will reach the right ears. These right ears will draw the right conclusions and thus protect themselves, as Mikhail Sergeyevich suggests. Thank you all for your attention. Goodbye and all the best.